The southwestern coast of Africa is home to a remarkable colony of seabirds. They cannot take to the air, but they glide effortlessly underwater. Master divers and swift ocean hunters. Once the most numerous seabird on the African coast, they are now threatened with extinction. But one small colony is potentially reversing their fortunes. These are the African penguins of Boulders Beach. The fogs of late summer are blanketing the Cape Peninsula. It's peak nesting season for African penguins. One of the world's 18 species of penguins, they are the only type breeding on this vast continent. 27 colonies remain in southern Africa. And of these, the African penguins breeding at Boulders Beach are the most unusual. In the early 1980s, penguins began establishing themselves on this urban beach on the southwestern tip of Africa. This is now the largest of only 3 known mainland colonies containing more than 1,000 breeding pairs. Ordinarily, African penguins prefer to breed on islands where they are safe from mainland predators. For centuries, seabirds flocked to these islands. Their accumulated droppings, known as guano, were more than 33 feet thick in places. During the early 1900s, humans started collecting guano, using it for fertilizer and even cosmetics, obliterating the penguins' homes, forcing them to look elsewhere. These houses are all that remains of this once thriving business. This created a grave problem for penguins because they rely on guano to build their nests, digging cool burrows in the hardened layers. Without guano, they are forced to nest out in the open and risk overheating. People also harvested penguin eggs as a delicacy. Between 1900 and 1930 alone, over 13 million eggs were collected. Consequently, populations of African penguin have collapsed. Today, the largest surviving breeding colonies are located on 2 small islands in Algoa Bay near Port Elizabeth. Conservationists are battling to save the 11,500 birds living here. Around 50% of the global population, they are critical to the survival of the African species. as are the penguins that were forced to move to the mainland. The penguins at Boulders live side by side with their human neighbors. The colony has become an important tourist attraction and is protected by Table Mountain National Park. The summer breeding season is the most stressful time of the year for the penguins. Mates need to be found, nests built, parents are under constant pressure to provide for growing chicks and to protect them from the elements. Predators are constantly on the prowl. At sea, Cape fur seals catch adults coming and going from the beach, while on land, gulls look to grab eggs and chicks from their nests. Less than half the size of the better-known emperor penguins, African penguins seldom stand taller than 28 inches. They are superbly adapted to their aquatic lives. Feathers have flattened shafts and overlap, creating a waterproof, well-insulated barrier. While a thick layer of blubber insulates them in waters colder than 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Their bodies are streamlined. Sharp beaks slice through the water, and their black and white, contrasting coloration makes them hard to spot in water. Solid bones lack the air pockets that many flying birds have, making penguins less buoyant, helping them swim under the surface. Unable to fly in air, their hardened wings propel them in water at speeds of up to 12 miles an hour. African penguins, along with their close relatives, the Magellanic, Humboldt, and Galapagos penguins, breed during warm summer months, which creates a problem. Unlike most penguins that are adapted to cold, sometimes freezing conditions, African penguins struggle against overheating, especially during the breeding season when they spend weeks on beaches, exposed to the harsh African sun. Panting helps keep their body temperatures down. Being adapted to the water has its downside on land, however. Their feet are better adapted as rudders than for maneuvering over rough terrain. and they're somewhat less than nimble on land. On the fringes of the colony, these young hopefuls are courting. They are first-timers, embarking on their maiden breeding season. Finding the right partner is important because African penguins are monogamous, and overcoming the stresses of the breeding season requires a partner you can rely on. The pair engage in mutual grooming to cement the arrangement. Older birds are also arriving to begin their breeding effort. They've spent months fishing at sea. Males arrive first, females a few days later. After a few days re-establishing their bonds with displays of affection and mutual grooming, they reclaim a nest site in their colony. Nearly all breeding pairs return to the same colony every season. The new pair joins other colony members in the water. Vigorously splashing water through their feathers helps remove dust and mites. This daily ritual is critical in keeping their feathers in good condition. After bathing, they spread oil on their feathers from a special preen gland located above the base of their tail. The oil protects feathers and assists in waterproofing. Feather care is critical. Without the insulation they provide in water, the penguins will not survive. After rinsing their feathers, it's time for the new young couple to find a nest. With no guano to dig into, they're looking for an alternative, cool, sheltered site. This concrete drain pipe is not quite what she was hoping for, but maybe it'll do. Maybe not. Somebody else has already claimed this spot. With shelter in short supply, most pairs end up nesting on the busy beach. It may be a little crowded and hot, but if you're not too fussy, there's a spot for everyone. The female starts a shallow scrape. The male heads off to find some creature comforts. Every pair has their own preferences. African penguins are aggressively territorial, and navigating the cramped surroundings is often a challenge. Delivering materials and mutual displays helps cement the lifelong bond between the breeding couple. In boulders, African penguins make shallow scrapes on the beach or build nests under the thick dune vegetation. But they prefer to nest in burrows. However, attempts to dig deep burrows are usually futile here, as they collapse in the soft sand. So conservationists provide plastic burrows to assist breeding pairs by sheltering them from the elements. Roughly 13% more chicks survive in these artificial homes. Every surviving egg is one step further from the brink of extinction. African penguins lay 2 eggs a few days apart. Eggs are jumbo-sized for a small bird, about twice the size of an average chicken's egg. Laying is just the first challenge. About 40 days of patient incubation for each egg now lie ahead. A duty she shares with her partner. Parents alternate fairly, each sitting on the nest one day, fishing the next. The new father is returning to sea to hunt. He's looking for small shoaling fish such as mackerel, round herring, sardines, and anchovies. These are found in large numbers in the cold, productive waters of the South Atlantic. Upwelling along this coast brings nutrient-rich water to the surface, meaning there's plenty of food available. Adult penguins tend to feed in small groups, closer to their colonies, rarely venturing more than 65 miles from home. They are exceptional swimmers, able to reach speeds when hunting of 13 miles an hour. Trips may last 10 hours and sometimes longer. Flying seabirds like cormorants and gannets travel further and 10 times faster than penguins on foraging trips. But penguins have the advantage that they are able to pursue prey deeper underwater than their flying neighbors. They can dive to an astonishing 430 feet, where their small bodies are subject to immense pressure. By comparison, scuba divers rarely dive deeper than 130 feet. African penguins remain underwater, holding their breath for on average 2.5 minutes, making them efficient undersea hunters. But humans also target the same fish stocks. Food shortages due to overfishing are contributing to the dramatic decline in penguin populations. Penguins in southern Africa are having to swim further and further to find enough food. Authorities stopped all commercial fishing in False Bay, extending over 380 square miles beyond their beach, essentially protecting their hunting grounds. It's not just the danger of starvation that penguins face on their fishing trips. At sea, they also run a gauntlet of predators. Cape fur seals in particular target penguins coming and going from their colonies. Ironically, they tend not to eat penguin flesh, but prefer to open their stomachs and feed on the fish inside. Once seals learn to pick off penguins, they can be devastating. One recorded seal killed and disemboweled 65 penguins in a day. Bigger predators such as great white sharks and seven-gill cow sharks also target penguins. But being small and nimble in the water means narrow escapes are common. And as long as the wounds do not become infected, victims are usually able to limp along without too many ill effects. The father returns safely from fishing. They greet each other, and she checks her eggs are secure in the nest before making way. He takes his turn on the nest. The female does not head off to sea immediately. There's time for a stretch and to exercise the vocal cords in a mutual display of affection. This braying gives these noisy characters their nickname, jackass penguins. Calls are important for communicating, mate recognition, and as a display for potential mates. The bond between males and females is not only crucial for eggs to survive, but for newly hatched chicks as well. Initially, young chicks are too small to fend for themselves. This first-time parent doesn't seem to realize her chicks are at risk of overheating. Their downy feathers are not well insulated, and they need a parent to shelter them during the heat of the day and keep them warm at night. Predators, such as this kelp gull, also look for any opportunity to strike. Gulls are the most common predator of eggs and chicks less than 15 days old. But he's outnumbered here and backs off for now. As the chicks grow, they become more demanding, and the pressure on the parents grows too. It's not only shading the ever bigger bundles of fluff that's challenging. Parents must provide each chick with more than 1 pound of food a day, on top of their own requirements. If their fishing expeditions prove fruitless, their chicks will starve. But parents won't compromise their own health for their youngsters. If they look after themselves, they'll have the chance to raise many future broods. Finding enough food is crucial to the success of the entire breeding season. Chicks are fed on fish regurgitated by their parents, because this is the easiest way for the birds to carry meals back to the colony. Parents are even able to slow their digestion while carrying food, so that they can give more of the meal to the youngsters back home. Every morsel is precious, and chicks push their beaks into their parents' throats to prevent spillage. Inside, their beaks and tongues have sharp, backward-facing, teeth-like structures to capture slippery prey. Rearing 2 chicks successfully is a considerable challenge. In 9 out of 10 nests, only 1 chick will survive. The second egg acts as insurance. First-time breeders in particular often fail to provide enough food for their chicks. Even incubating eggs proves challenging for them. With 1 chick already hatched, this inexperienced female hasn't been able to keep her other egg incubated. If she doesn't solve the problem, it will not hatch. The hungry gulls don't give up. They are an unwanted guest, but remain single-minded. But penguins are brave enough to keep the gull at bay. It's a narrow escape. Two species of gull thrive alongside the penguins. Hartlub's gulls prey on small invertebrates along the water's edge. Larger kelp gulls, which are expert scavengers, also do well in urban environments and make the most of any discarded scraps. They're also hunters, but their beaks are not strong enough to open shellfish like mussels and limpets living on the rocky coastline. And so, some individuals have an ingenious solution. Second time lucky. Oyster catchers do not need to resort to these tactics. Their bright orange bills pry limpets and mussels from the rocks. Finding enough food is less of a challenge for them because parents nest on the beaches and dunes, within a few hundred yards of a bountiful larder. And yet, humans also affect oyster catchers. Oyster catchers have remarkably camouflaged nests. But if disturbed, predators can nip in and steal their eggs. As with penguins, this has also caused alarming declines in their populations around southern Africa. Back on Boulders Beach, this neighboring couple has lost an egg and are now only rearing one chick. The chick is benefiting from the tragedy. Without the need to share food, it's growing bigger and faster than the rest of the cohort. Single chicks benefit from the undivided attention of both parents. And attention is critical to success. A moment's lapsed concentration has cost this couple dearly. It's a welcome meal for the gull. Which means the end of the breeding season for this unlucky pair. Finally, the gulls succeeded, which bodes well for his survival and future breeding success. The penguin's loss is the gull's gain. For the first 15 days, chicks have to be fed, guarded, and kept warm or cool by their parents. After about 15 days, however, the chicks are large enough and their feathers are sufficiently developed for them to control their own body temperature. By 30 days old, chicks are large enough to be left alone, enabling both parents to hunt at the same time. Chicks are fed as long as they remain in the colony, which, depending on the food available, may be 2 or 3 months. By this stage, the chicks have molted into their juvenile feathers. They look different from their parents and are known as blues because of the bluish-gray color. Blues lack the prominent black and white coloration of the adults. It's thought that this makes them particularly camouflaged in the water. Blues are more independent, and adults pay them increasingly less attention and may even encourage them to leave the nest and head off on their own. But with independence comes life's first real challenges. And finding yourself in the wrong part of town in this colony results in a vicious attack. Penguins are highly territorial and aggressive and do not tolerate intruders. They have been known to gang up on other bird intruders and peck them to death. No harm done this time. After 4 months, the young penguins are ready to head to sea for the first time on their own. It's the most dangerous time in their lives, and only half the youngsters entering the water will make it to breeding age. It's a time of wandering, often 620 miles or more from home. In contrast, adults rarely venture more than 250 miles from their colony. At sea, the young birds gain valuable experience, preparing them for their own breeding efforts in later life. The distance also possibly helps them avoid competition with adults closer to the colonies. Juveniles retain their plumage for about 18 months before returning to their colonies for their first molt into adult colors. Penguins can molt throughout the year, but the peak molting season in spring allows them enough time to prepare for the late summer breeding season. Feathers are critical for waterproofing, so they molt all their feathers in one go, unlike land birds, which are able to molt continuously. During molting, penguins must remain on land and are not able to hunt at sea, so they spend an extended period fishing to prepare for their molt. During this period, they eat more than 2.5 pounds of fish a day, laying down extra fat, often increasing their body weight by 30% or more. The molt lasts about 20 days. It's a delicate balance for the penguins, who need to conserve enough resources to make it through. They can lose 3 ounces a day during the molt. Once all the feathers are replaced, the famished penguins return to sea, desperately in need of food. With the molt behind them, it's time to replenish their reserves in preparation for the next breeding season. The young adults that left their colonies a year or 2 ago and have survived their formative years at sea are returning to land in search of mates and a place to breed. They don't always return to the colonies of their birth, and will choose new colonies to call their own if they discover better feeding conditions in the area. Once a new site is adopted, however, it tends to become their colony for life. Once more, the rocks are filled with hopeful youngsters, gingerly navigating the task of finding a lifelong mate and partner. With the species under threat, the breeding success of these young hopefuls is not only critical to the future of the Boulders Beach colony, but of all African penguins. Boulders Beach is giving African penguins a second chance for long-term survival. And being an African penguin is all about adaptation and second chances. For the parents who have lost eggs or chicks, the next breeding season is around the corner. For those youngsters who survived, the adventure is just beginning.